My name's Clara, and I'm 32, living in a weathered Cape Cod house on the coast of Maine that I bought with every penny of my inheritance. It's not just a house, it's my sanctuary, a place where the salty breeze drifts through the windows and the light hits my easel just right, perfect for painting. After my parents died in a boating accident, I threw myself into fixing this place up, board by board, to make it mine. Every creaky floor and chipped shingle feels like a piece of me, a way to keep their memory alive while building something new. But lately, that sanctuary's been under siege, and it's not the leaky roof or the peeling paint causing the trouble. It's my mother-in-law, Vivian. I've been married to Charles for 7 years. He's a high school history teacher, the kind of guy who remembers every kid's name and brings home stories that make you laugh over dinner. But he's got a blind spot the size of a lighthouse when it comes to his mom. Vivian is a retired real estate agent who could sell ice to a polar bear, all charm and crocodile tears. She's never liked me, not since the day Charles brought me home to meet her. To her, I'm the outsider who stole her son, the one who didn't fit into her perfect family picture. Over the years, I've dealt with her snide comments about my artsy career or how I wasted my inheritance on this drafty old house instead of handing it over to Charles. But I always swallowed it, for his sake. One morning, Charles walked into our kitchen, his face heavy with that look he gets when Vivian's involved. "Clara, we need to talk," he said, his voice low, like he was delivering bad news. Vivian stood behind him, clutching a tissue, her eyes red like she'd been crying for hours. My stomach knotted up. I was at the table, sketching plans for my art studio, the one room in the house I'd been dreaming of turning into my creative haven. "The doctor says I got pancreatic cancer," Vivian said, her voice wobbling like a tightrope. 6 months, maybe less. "I can't be alone, Clara. I need to be with family." She sank into the armchair by the window, the same one she'd sniffed at last week, saying it clashed with her taste in decor. Charles put a hand on her shoulder, his jaw tight. "Mom needs to move in with us," he said, not asking, just stating it like it was already decided. "We can turn your studio into her bedroom." My chest felt like it was caving in. That studio was my refuge, where I'd planned to paint again after years of grief had stolen my spark. The way the morning light poured through those windows was like a promise I'd made to myself to keep going. And now Vivian wanted to take it. "I know this is a lot," Vivian said, dabbing her eyes, "but family sticks together in tough times, don't they?" Her words were sweet, but her gaze was sharp, like she was daring me to say no. I'd seen this act before. Vivian had a knack for emergencies that always seemed to pop up when Charles and I had plans. Like the time she claimed a heart condition right before our Hawaii trip, or the allergic reaction that derailed our anniversary weekend. But cancer? This felt different, heavier. I wanted to believe her, but something in her too perfect tears made my skin crawl. "Which doctor said this?" I asked, keeping my voice steady. Vivian blinked, just for a second, before answering. "Dr. Larson, at the community hospital." I nodded, filing that away. "Maybe we should get a second opinion," I said. Charles's face darkened. "Clara, my mom's dying. Where's your heart?" I looked at him, the man I loved, who always chose his mother's side without question. "I just need to think about it," I said, standing up. Vivian's lips twitched, like she was holding back a smirk. "Of course, dear," she said. "But Charles is my son, and this house is his too. A son takes care of his mother." I walked out to the porch, the ocean air hitting my face as I tried to breathe through the tightness in my chest. This house was in my name, bought with my parents' money, their memory woven into every wall. Vivian knew that, and it burned her. I could feel it, the same jealousy she'd shown when I refused to let her advise me on selling the place years ago. Sitting on the porch swing, I pulled out my phone and dialed the community hospital. "I'm sorry," the receptionist said after a pause. "We have no patient records for a Vivian." My heart thudded. I called my sister-in-law, Nancy, a social worker who'd always been straight with me. "Can you check something for me?" I asked. I wasn't letting this go. The next few days felt like walking on a tightrope. Vivian didn't waste any time. She showed up with boxes, stacking them in my front hall like she was already claiming the place. She'd wander through the house, touching the walls, muttering about how she'd repaint the living room a proper color, not my soft sage green. "This place could use a woman's touch," she'd say, glancing at me like I'd failed some test. Charles trailed her, nodding along, his silence cutting deeper than her words. I wanted to scream, but I kept my cool, watching, waiting. I knew better than to confront her without proof. Nancy got back to me a few days later. "Clara, you were right," she said over the phone, her voice tight. "I called every oncology department within 100 miles. No record of Vivian. No appointments, no tests, nothing." My grip on the phone tightened. I'd hoped I was wrong, that maybe Vivian was sick, and I was just paranoid. But no, she was lying, faking pancreatic cancer to worm her way into my home. Nancy sighed. "She's done this before, you know. Remember when she swore she had a blood clot before my college graduation? I missed the ceremony because Charles and I were at the hospital with her. Turned out she was fine." I sat on the porch steps, staring at the ocean, the waves crashing like my thoughts. Vivian's lies weren't new, but this was a new low. I thought back to the Hawaii trip we canceled because of her heart condition, how she'd miraculously recovered the day after we would have left. Or the time she had food poisoning, right when Charles got a job offer in Boston, guilting him into staying close to home. Each time, I'd let it slide, telling myself it was just how she was. But this, faking cancer to take my studio, my sanctuary, it was too much. I started digging deeper. I called Dr. Larson's office again, pretending to follow up on Vivian's treatment. The nurse was confused. "Dr. Larson hasn't practiced here in years," she said. "He's retired." My blood ran cold. Vivian hadn't just lied. She built her story on a ghost. I printed out emails from the hospitals Nancy checked, everyone confirming no trace of Vivian's supposed diagnosis. The evidence felt heavy in my hands, like a weapon I wasn't sure I was ready to use. Meanwhile, Vivian kept pushing. She'd leave voicemails for Charles, her voice all shaky tears, talking about how she didn't want to burden us, but needed to be close to her son in her final days. Charles would listen, his face crumpling, and I'd feel that familiar ache, loving him but hating how easily she played him. One evening, he caught me staring at the boxes in the hall. "Clara, why can't you just let this go?" he said, his voice sharp. "She's my mom. She's sick." I wanted to shake him, to show him the emails, but I held back. I needed the right moment, one where Vivian couldn't twist the truth. That moment came when Vivian announced a family lobster bake at her house. "I want everyone together," she said, her eyes gleaming, "to share the news and make plans." I knew what she was doing, stacking the deck, inviting Charles's sister Nancy, his Aunt Diane, and a dozen cousins to pressure me into agreeing. She thought she'd corner me in front of everyone, make me the villain if I said no. But as I watched her unpack a suitcase in my guest room, humming like she already owned the place, I felt something shift. This wasn't just about my studio or my house. It was about my life, my marriage, my right to the truth. I clutched the folder of evidence under my arm and nodded. "A lobster bake sounds perfect," I said. Vivian smiled, thinking she'd won. She had no idea what was coming. The lobster bake was in full swing, the backyard filled with the smell of steamed clams and buttery corn. Tables were draped with red and white checkered cloths, and fairy lights twinkled against the Maine dusk. Charles's family milled around, laughing, clinking glasses, but I felt like I was holding my breath. Vivian played her part perfectly, wearing a soft scarf around her shoulders, her face pale with just the right touch of frailty. She hugged cousins, dabbed her eyes, and dropped hints about her condition all evening. I watched from the edge of the crowd, my folder of evidence tucked inside a tote bag, my heart pounding like the waves against the shore. After the main course, Vivian stood, tapping her glass with a spoon. The chatter died down, and all eyes turned to her. "I have something to share," she said, her voice catching just so. "The doctors have given me difficult news. Pancreatic cancer. I don't have long, but I'm so grateful to Clara and Charles for opening their home to me in my final days." She looked at me, her smile all gratitude, but her eyes dared me to challenge her. Charles squeezed her hand, his face heavy with pride, while murmurs of sympathy rippled through the crowd. Nancy caught my eye, her jaw tight, and I knew she was with me. I stood, my legs steady despite the knot in my stomach. "I have something to say, too," I said, lifting my glass. Vivian's smile froze. I pulled a folder from my bag, my voice calm but firm. "I called Dr. Larson's office. And every oncology department within 100 miles. The backyard went silent, the only sound the distant crash of waves. There's no record of Vivian Marsh having cancer. No tests, no appointments, nothing. I slid the emails across the table, each one a nail in her story. Vivian's glass trembled in her hand, her face draining of color. "What are you doing, Clara?" Charles said, standing, his voice sharp but shaky. I met his eyes, hating how this hurt him, but knowing it had to be done. "Dr. Larson retired years ago," I said. "His office doesn't even exist anymore. I checked every hospital. Vivian's not sick. She never was." Whispers erupted. Diane, Vivian's sister, leaned forward, her eyes narrow. "Is this true, Viv?" Vivian laughed, a brittle sound. "She's lying. She just doesn't want me here, in her perfect little house." But her voice cracked, and I saw Nancy's hand tighten on her glass. I pushed the emails toward Diane. "Call the hospitals yourself," I said. "It's all there." Vivian's cousin Mark grabbed the papers, scanning them, his face darkening. "Vivian, what the hell?" he said. Nancy spoke up, her voice cutting through the tension. "She's done this before. The blood clot before my graduation. The heart scare when Charles almost moved to Boston. It's always lies to keep him close." Vivian's face twisted. "Nancy, how dare you turn on your own mother?" But Diane shook her head. "No, Viv. This is too far. Faking cancer? My best friend died of it. How could you?" Charles stared at the emails, his hands shaking. "Mom," he said, his voice breaking, "tell me this isn't true." Vivian opened her mouth, but no words came. Her carefully built facade was crumbling, and the truth was bare for everyone to see. "You wanted this house," I said, my voice steady. "You've always hated that I bought it, that I had something you couldn't control." The crowd's murmurs grew louder, and Vivian's eyes darted, desperate for an ally. But even her cousins looked away, their faces a mix of shock and disgust. She sank into her chair, defeated, and for the first time, I saw her without her mask, small, exposed, and alone. The lobster bake ended in a quiet exodus. Family members gathered their plates, avoiding Vivian's gaze as they slipped out the gate. Charles took his mother's arm, his face a mask of hurt, and said, "I'll drive you home, Mom." Vivian protested, her voice shrill, but he shook his head. "Not tonight." I watched them go, the taillights of Charles's car fading down the coastal road. The backyard felt too big, too empty, the fairy lights mocking the wreckage of the evening. I started clearing the tables, the clink of dishes grounding me as my mind spun. I sat on the porch later, the folder of emails still in my lap, the ocean's rhythm steadying my breath. I'd won in a way. Vivian's lie was exposed. My home was safe. But the victory felt hollow. Charles's face kept flashing in my mind, the way his eyes had searched mine, caught between disbelief and betrayal. I loved him, but loving him had meant swallowing years of Vivian's jabs, her emergencies that always seemed to pull him away from me. The Hawaii trip we never took, the anniversary she ruined with her fake illness, each one a wound-eyed bandaged with silence. This time, I couldn't stay quiet. But what did it cost? Would Charles come back, or had I pushed him too far? I walked inside, past the boxes Vivian had left in the hall, and into my art studio. The easel stood empty, waiting for the day I'd finally paint again. I thought of my parents, how they taught me to stand my ground, to build something of my own. This house was theirs, in a way. Their love, their loss, poured into every shingle. Vivian had seen it as a prize to steal, a symbol of what she couldn't have. Her divorce had left her scraping by, her real estate dreams fading while I built my sanctuary. I understood her envy, but I couldn't forgive her cruelty. The front door creaked open, and Charles stepped inside, his shoulders slumped. He looked at me, his eyes raw. "I dropped her off," he said, his voice rough. "She cried the whole way, said I was abandoning her for you." He ran a hand through his hair, pacing the kitchen. "I didn't see it, Clara. All those times, the heart condition, the blood clot, now this." She knew exactly what she was doing. I leaned against the counter, my arms crossed. "She's always known," I said softly. "And you let her." He flinched, but he didn't argue. "My aunt died of cancer," he said, his voice breaking. How could she use that? How could I believe her? He sank into a chair, looking lost in the kitchen we'd painted together, the one we'd laughed in during late-night talks. "I love you, Clara," he said, meeting my eyes. "But I've been a lousy husband, haven't I? Always choosing her over you." I swallowed hard, the truth of his words cutting deep. "I stayed because I love you too," I said. "But I can't keep fighting her for you." "I won't." He nodded, his face etched with shame. "I know. I want to fix this. No more letting her run our lives." I called Nancy. "She's looking into therapists for Mom. Maybe for us too." I felt a flicker of hope, but it was cautious, fragile. "It's going to take work, Charles," I said. "Real boundaries. No more emergencies pulling you away." He reached out, his hand open. "I'm in, Clara. For us." I looked at his hand, my heart torn between fear and longing. This was the man I'd married, buried under years of Vivian's control, but maybe, he was finally breaking free. The weeks after the lobster bake were a slow climb. Charles and I set rules. No unannounced visits from Vivian, no more emergencies without proof. She fought it, of course. Tearful voicemails, texts accusing me of tearing her family apart. But Charles held firm, deleting her messages, his face grim but resolute. Nancy stepped up, giving Vivian an ultimatum: get therapy or lose contact. To my surprise, Vivian agreed, though her sessions were rocky, full of excuses at first. I didn't care if she changed, I just wanted her out of our lives until she did. Charles and I started counseling too, peeling back years of hurt. I told him how Vivian's lies had made me feel invisible, how his loyalty to her had chipped away at us. He listened, really listened, and shared his own guilt, how he'd been raised to see his mom as fragile, always needing him. Slowly, we rebuilt. We laughed again, planned again. One evening, he brought home paint swatches for the studio, grinning like the man I fell in love with. "Let's make it yours," he said. I cried then, not from pain but from the relief of being seen. I finished the studio, hanging canvases under that perfect main light. Each stroke felt like reclaiming a piece of myself, the grief over my parents easing with every color. Charles and I finally took that trip, a honeymoon to the Pacific Northwest, where we hiked misty trails and sent postcards to Vivian from every stop. Not out of spite, but to show her we were living, free of her shadow. When we got back, the house felt different, lighter, like it was truly ours. No boxes in the hall, no lingering tension. One afternoon, as I worked in the garden, I found a tiny rosebud pushing through the rocky soil. It felt like us, small, stubborn, growing despite the odds. Vivian sent a letter a few weeks later, a real apology, not perfect but honest. She's still in therapy, learning to let go of control. I don't trust her fully, and maybe I never will, but it's a start. Charles and I aren't perfect either, but we're honest, and that's enough. This house, this home, stands stronger now, built on truth instead of secrets. I think of that lobster bake sometimes, how close I came to losing it all. But standing up for myself, for us, was worth every second of fear. I look at Charles now, helping me in the garden, and I know we're building something real, a life where no one can steal our light. To everyone who's followed this journey, thank you. You've walked with me through betrayal, courage, and a hard-won peace. If this story hit home, hit that subscribe button and join us. Every corner of this house holds a story of loss, love, and starting over. Keep building your own truth, and I'll meet you by the sea.